Hello students and welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. Today we bring another interesting topic that is about North Korea and South Korea's bilateral relations. In fact, I should call probably they are going to be at war. So today with us we have Gaurav sir, who is an expert on international relations. Welcome you, Gaurav sir.
Thank you.
So let's just quickly get into the topic and let's get to know from the expert directly. So Gaurav sir, before I put in the very first question, as far as my historical knowledge is there, I see that previously the world was bipolar, and you can see the interference of USA, USSR in various countries for that matter. So the question is, can you trace this North Korea and South Korea issue also at a particular event or timeline in history? And was there an involvement of USA or USSR or both of them which led to the cause of war between the two countries?
Exactly. So I can refer this North Korea South Korea tussle that is going on for almost last 70 years to the great power game that was being played between the communist bloc led by Soviet Union, China, and the capitalist bloc that was largely led by the US and its allied partners. So if you exactly trace back the history of North and South Korean war, it goes back to somewhere year 1945. To give you a context before that, since 1910, Korea was basically a colony of Japan. Now after this 1945, we know that the war was fought between Japan, France, Japan, Germany, and then you have Italy. And against them, we have the US and its allied. Now, as a result of the World War II, we know that we have the end of the World War II where the allied powers became victorious. As a result of this, Japan basically surrendered the Korean territory, and the Korean territory went under the control of two powers. The northern part of Korea, basically after independence, we can say the Korea was divided, where the northern part went to the Soviet bloc and the southern part went to the capitalist bloc led by Soviet Union. Led by the United States of America. So obviously we can trace it back to those points.
Yes, very well. At the same time, there has been a Korean War in the initial 1950, at the early time of 1950, and it is said that technically, till now, after so many decades, technically they are still at war. So can you explain this to our audience as to why they are still at war?
Yeah. So if we try to understand, in 1950, when the war was waged by the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung, especially under the guidance of Chinese and Soviet government, the war went on almost for 3 years. Thus, in 1953, when the US and the UN-led forces captured the North Korean territory, basically, and the North Korean forces were sent back, that time they did not sign a peace treaty. Both countries have signed what is called in international relations armistice agreement. Now, armistice agreement basically refers to an agreement which can be compared to a temporary ceasefire-like agreement, where both countries have decided that they will not wage war or they will not attack each other's territory, pending the resolution or ultimate resolution of their dispute or conflict. So that is the reason why we are calling this also as a forgotten war, because actually the countries have not signed a peace treaty, they have just signed armistice, a temporary ceasefire agreement, and anytime a country feels it can again start war or attack on the other country's territory. So that is the issue about this.
All right, very well. That's interesting actually. And also we see when two countries are in a war, the international organizations or various other countries who might be supporting one country, opposing another country, would want other countries also to give their opinion. That's one thing. Secondly, they may also want maybe a middleman kind of a country to make them cool down, calm down. So those things are there. We see right now also with respect to Ukraine, Russia, people wanted an opinion from India. And then India did give an opinion, right? So did India have any role to play in the Korean War during that or in the aftermath of the Korean War with respect to a role being played or a stance being taken by India?
Yeah, so interestingly, we talk about though India did not have any direct geopolitical interest in the Korean Peninsula or East Asia basically at that point in time. India has played a very unique role in the United Nations. At that time, United Nations, we have India's permanent representative in United Nations, that is V.K. Krishna Menon. So he basically wanted, or India overall under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru that time, wanted the restoration of the peace between both nations, and also the India stood for the reunification of the entire Korean Peninsula under one nation. India had maintained a neutral stance either before war or during war. But reunification is something that India always has desired, and it has put its stance at the United Nations as well. Now, in United Nations, India has proposed to set up a committee that is referred as Neutral Nations Repatriation Committee. Now, this Neutral Nation Repatriation Committee referred to a committee which was largely geared toward the protection of the, what we can say, the prisoners of war. Okay. So at that time, India basically said that if any prisoner of war do not want to return back to his own nation under the fear of persecution by the government or the regime, that time they should be protected under the Geneva Conventions. Now, this is something that was primarily opposed both by the China and Russia, because they believed that North Korean soldiers would not return back. Many of the North Korean soldiers would not return back to North Korea, which would be a diplomatic, you can say, loss of face to them. And that is why initially they protested it against, but again, under the leadership of the permanent representative of India and with the help of the many countries such as Poland, Hungary and all that, the United Nations General Assembly was able to accept the resolution. Thus, the India, under the helm of Indian leadership, we can say, the Neutral Nation, this Repatriation Commission was formed, under which India was allowed to create a contingency force, which was to be sent at the armistice line, basically, which is referred as 38th parallel. And actually, India, under the leadership of GS, at that time, you have Lieutenant General K.S. Thimaiya, the force was sent, contingency force was sent, and for a long duration of time after the end of war, this contingency force remained in the Korean territory, largely toward the South Korean side, and many of the North Korean prisoner of war who basically did not want to return back, they were protected by the Indian journals. Also, there was a medical team that was sent along with it, and this medical team not only tended to the wound of the what we can call soldiers, but also tended to the general public there at that time if they have any problems, medical problems and all that. And interestingly, that area where the Indian soldiers were deputed, the contingency force were deputed along with medical team, even today it is many times referred in documents as the Hind line, referring to the India.
Amazing. Amazing. That gives me goosebumps. So we have always seen historically, when asked to choose a side, India has always chosen the side of peace.
Exactly.
Right. And just treatment of everyone involved, which is so beautiful. So sometimes it makes me feel that why can't every other country do that? If we do that, probably, world peace will prevail. Anyhow, moving on. So since 1950s, they are still at war, and with the kind of leaders that we have seen, especially in North Korea, it is very surprising that some big proportionate war has not yet happened. So what do you think since then has the relationship, of course, now it is deteriorating because of the things that is happening, which we're going to see later on. But in the last 50, 60 years, has the relationship gone better, or it has remained worse, or it has become stagnant?
Yeah, so if you try to trace back the relationship between both countries, especially after the end of 1953 war, till 1970s, there was something that we can call as the tensions that kept flaring up.
Okay.
But since 1970s, the leadership of both countries always desired to have a reunification, if possible, a peaceful reunification. However, many times North Korean leaders also have hinted that if necessary, they will reunite the country even by using the force. But that has been the overall stance under the three leaders that we have seen in the North Korea, and similar stance we have seen in South Korea, where they have desired the reunification. The otherwise, if we talk about the three major years, that is 2000, 2008 and 2012, where both countries came together to come to some sort of agreement where they wanted to resolve their dispute peacefully without resorting to any kind of attacks or any kind of threats against each other. But problem is that in all these 3 years, even when they came together to come to certain sort of agreement, it did not materialize into some substantial agreement or some substantial understanding. So overall, that is the stance that has been maintained. But the problem is that by 2019, when the US under the presidency of Donald Trump, when Donald Trump went to meet the Kim Jong-un, the current leader of North Korea, and that time there was a lot of hullabaloo around it. People were, or the countries were expecting that some sort of agreement the country will come across, and they will also talk something about how the denuclearization has to be done in North Korea, or maybe the many sanctions that has been imposed on North Korean regime. Maybe we will see the easing of such sanctions. And also because for the first time in the history, any American president has met any North Korean leader, that was Donald Trump, and not only once, he met twice. So the second time when he met in the Hanoi, the capital city of Vietnam, where the Kim Jong-un has come by train, and there was a lot of media attention also about this particular issue, particular meeting. But the problem is that this meeting ended very abruptly, And not only they could not come to some substantial sort of agreement, but they were not even a joint declaration that was published at the end of the meeting. And many experts argue that such kind of abrupt end of meeting led to the loss of face for the North Korean regime, especially for the Kim Jong-un, because this meeting yielded nothing for him. And that is why he has been taunted also by the China and Russia as well. So due to this reason, after 2019, this debacle, the Kim Jong-un or North Korea overall changed its stance, where they said that will reunite the peninsula even by use of force, and they have again went back to the nuclear proliferation, which they have ended for some time, especially since 2000, that is called as Inter-Korea Detente. So nuclear proliferation again began. They again began to have a very strong relationship with both China and Russia, which is largely seen as opposed to the United States or South Korea-led alliances.
All right, great enough. So, okay, fine. The relations were good. They were talking good in the sense that it was not bad, is what I would say. And they were talking about the reunification as well. But as you suggested, now that stance has been taken back. Now, very vehemently, the voices are coming that we will not let reunification happen. That is one thing. Secondly, they are literally breaking any link of road, railways that are present by blasting their own countryside's roads and railway links. So what has been the trigger in the very recent that has led North Korea to take such steps?
Yeah, so as we have discussed, since 2000, the countries have entered an era which is referred as Inter-Korea Detente, which was largely a peaceful era, especially taking into consideration the earlier times of 1950s, 1960s. And it is during this time to build or to send a message of solidarity, not solidarity, basically we can say the message of what we can say, normalization of relationship. The countries agree to develop a roadway and railway link. However, these road and railway link has not been used for so many years, but it was a possibility that in future, if the countries' relationship normalize, they can reuse it for exchanging of goods, services, or even movement of the people across the border. And this is something that was indication of the renormalization of relationship. But the current, we can say, the step that the North Korea has taken, where they have not only the blasted and roadways and railway line, but they also have put a lot of anti-tank barriers. They have begun to fortify the borders. They have begun to put military outposts along this border. So this is seen as a worsening of situation, and many experts across the world argue that this situation that we are witnessing today is worse since at least 1945, when the countries were at worst of the relationship, and later on they went on the war. Now, if you talk about, this is something that was done by North Korea allegedly due to two things. One is because of the joint military drills and exercises that United States forces and the South Korean forces have been carrying out around the peninsula. And second, also because the North Korea has blamed that South Korea, using its drone, were dropping a lot of such kind of leaflet, which was largely anti-Pyongyang instance, basically anti-communist leaflet. And North Korea understood that this was an attempt to mobilize the North Korean population against the dictatorship or dictatorial regime. As a response of this, before this blasting of roads and railway line, the North Korea were interestingly sending helium balloons, and within those helium balloons, a lot of trash were there. That was basically dropped in the South Korean territory. So this was something that we can say was the lighter version of the this confrontation and conflict. And now we are seeing a slightly more, we can say, worsening version of that, where the blasting and the military outpost is being raised there, and all these things, fortification and everything that we are seeing.
Interesting, the use of drones and balloons, because in history, if you can see West Germany and East Germany, there was a great wall that was created. So the West, what is happening in the West, the East cannot see.
Exactly.
Right, because it was said that the West is doing well and the East, led by the communist, was not in a good condition. So that's why they built a wall. But here you can't even do that, because you have drones these days, you have balloons and various other tactics. Interesting. So having said that, whenever such thing happens between two countries, the world or the international organization looks towards the superpowers of the world to try to sort it out. Now, India, we may not yet be called a superpower, but we are on our way to becoming one. And not just that, the world does look at what India's opinion is and whose side India is taking. So, like India played some amount of role previously, can you foresee India playing some role here as well? If yes, what can that role be? Or can any other country play any role over here?
Yeah, so as far as India is concerned, since beginning, like when the country divided into North Korea and South Korea, India has maintained a strong bilateral relationship with the South Korea, both because it is beneficial from economic point of view, as we know that South Korea is a developed economy.
Correct.
And second, also because South Korea has alliance with United States and light power, with which India has a very good economic and we can say strategic partnership. So due to this region, and also we talk about on the other hand, North Korea has remained isolated. It is largely being due to the sanctions imposed by the United Nations, and also because of its geographical location, where it can only be accessed through the territory of China. And as we know that India and China has not enjoyed a good relationship.
Yes.
And if we talk about, since China and North Korea are more strategically allied, India has maintained its stance, though it has maintained a stance of neutrality and always it has maintained a peaceful stance. It has largely taken the side of South Korea, you can say in that manner. So as far as the peace agreement, if we talk about or how the situations evolve in the future, I do not see India playing a direct role in bilateral relations of North and South Korea. If any role India has to play, obviously it will play at the United Nations level. If some issue comes up there or some somewhat we can say proposal are brought at the table of United Nations General Assembly, or whenever India became member of the indirect, what we can say, the non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council as well. But as of now, I don't see India playing a direct role in the warfare. And as far as the other countries are concerned, see again what we are seeing here is nothing but the extension of the great power game that is being played not only in the Korean Peninsula, but also we are seeing it in the we have Taiwanese region, where we are seeing the United States having ironclad alliance with Taiwan, where it always says that it will protect the interest of Taiwan against any possible Chinese attack or incursion. We are seeing same in the European region, where we are having Ukraine, where again the great power game is being played between the Russia, which are having a kind of indirect alliance, we can say, or support from the China side, and then you have Ukraine supported by the US and the European Union powers. And also nowadays we are seeing the same happening in the West Asia, Middle East, where you have Iran having a kind of de facto alliance with the Russia and China, and then you have the Israel largely being supported by the West. So overall, if you extend the entire, if you try to draw imaginary boundary, you can see that right from the European continent, then to the West Asia, then all the way to the Taiwan, and then further in East Asia to the Korean Peninsula, we are seeing a bifurcation or division, where on the northern side you have the Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, such kind of powers, and on the southern side you have the US, its allied powers, especially from the European Union, and the countries which are acting against the aggression, such as South Korea, Taiwan, and Israel.
Correct.
So this is what we are seeing here in this peninsula as well.
Yeah, so it's like history repeating itself, in the sense that historically we have seen USA is the leader and has a lot of countries which it backs. And on the opposing side had been the then USSR and the countries that they are backing, or they have occupied, whatever it is. Now on the other side, instead of USSR, you see Russia and China being the two leaders. So now it's like USA on one side and Russia and China probably on the other side. And India asked to choose the side, so we of course have a dehyphenation policy. So that's there. So interestingly, yes, India may not be able to play a direct role, and probably we don't even need to play a direct role there. It's not our basically a cup of coffee over there. So having said that, what do you think will be the future here? Do you think it will become worse and a war-like situation, which is already there? Can it get converted into a full-fledged war, or do we see this pacifying in any time in the future?
Yeah, see, exactly that. If we talk about even World War II, before the actual breakout of war, no one was sure that war will break out or not. People were believing in the Hitler, that he has signed so many non-aggression pact with the Poland, and they were in discussion with the Czechoslovakia, Sudeten land transfer, all we know. But again, Hitler decided to wage a war. So similarly, if we talk about even few years back, Russia was building up its forces along the Ukrainian line, and even at that time many experts across the world argued that there is no possibility of war, this is just a show of force and all that. But once suddenly you have the breakout of the war, so any kind of misunderstanding can obviously lead into the war, which we can see also happening between the North Korea and South Korea. Specifically because what we are seeing these days is that China and Russia are strongly backing North Korea, especially after the breakout of, before we know that China has very strategic and very good partnership with North Korea. Russia, however, was not so much interested or was not directly related with the North Korea. But in this Russia-Ukraine war, since Russia has lost its face because it was not able to gain the quick strategic victory that it wanted, and now since the war has entered into protected phase, North Korea has been supplying artillery cells to the Russia. And also recently, Vladimir Putin has met Kim Jong-un as well. So it is believed in this strategic community largely that the iron-clad deterrent that South Korea had due to its alliance with the United States, where any attack on South Korea would have been strongly repelled by the US-led forces. Now that deterrence has weakened and North Korea has witnessed this, plus North Korea is confident in case of war, Russia and China will be behind them, which themselves are very good, we can say, strong forces as far as the warfare is concerned. So as of now, I do not see the war breaking out immediately, but war can break out if there is misunderstanding or any kind of lack of communication or any missteps that are taken by any of the parties, which can be construed as the other parties being an act of aggression or act of war.
Fair enough, fair enough. So if in unforeseen situation, the final question probably that the war breaks out, what impact can it have on the world in general and in particular in India, not just with respect to the economy and all, but since you have nuclear power states fighting against each other, or one state is backed by another state which is nuclear power, so basically both the countries are nuclear power. In such a scenario, war breaking out, what can be security, safety, sovereignty issues with respect to the entire world in general and India in particular?
Yeah, so again, if you try to understand, North Korea, obviously they have tested nuclear weapons, then they're proliferating, they keep testing ballistic missiles also every now and then. Second, you talk about South Korea, it does not have nuclear power of its own, but obviously since US is in a strategic alliance with South Korea, if there is a need, there will be attacked by nuclear weapons also. However, we cannot say that there will be a nuclear war because it will be the end of the both countries in one way, if any kind of nuclear weapon is launched. So what we're talking about is that if any possibility of war is there, it can definitely happen if there is a misstep or any kind of miscalculation. And obviously since North Korea has nuclear capability, whether it shows its nuclear capability, will it will have a kind of nuclear attack on the South Korea, that seems very what you can say immature to think about that, because obviously North Korea will not take any decision single-handedly. They will be guided by the Russia and China as well, and both these powers obviously will not want to get involved in any kind of nuclear attacks and all. So in the case war breaks out, it will be a non-nuclear war, and there can be possibility that they might try to shift the border, even if cannot reunify the entire peninsula, and in there we can see direct and indirect support of the great powers as well. Obviously, as far as the impact is concerned, it will have an impact because South Korea, as you know, is a very stable country, very stable economy, and it has a very good alliance with India also, especially in terms of economic partnership. So economic impact on India obviously will be observed. Plus, we'll also see change in the what we can see is the fall in the markets as well, which can impact the Indian markets also, because as you know, the global market has significant impact on the Indian market and also. So economic impact is something I can see happening from the war immediately. Large scale impact or the long term impact is something that we can only understand once the situation evolves and how it evolves.
All right, Gaurav sir, thank you so much for such great insights. So students, I believe you have a better understanding now about the South Korea and North Korea issue that is going on. These things are very important for your mains, for your personality test. So thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned to Legacy IAS Academy's YouTube channel for more such podcasts and other information bits, which is very important and crucial for your UPSC preparation. Thank you so much, guys.